You have a great time listening to the story. If you enjoy it, don't forget to give me a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Opening my eyes, I found myself back in the familiar bridal chamber, the air thick with wedding festivities. My memories still lingered on the moment of my death. Crown Prince Edmund hated me for blocking his romance with my cousin Sophia. When I was 6 months pregnant, he used the pretense of praying at Mount Tai to have me kidnapped by mountain bandits. To avoid being violated, I jumped off the cliff, taking my own life along with my unborn child. All the memories from my past life flooded back. I stood frozen for a long time before finally making a bold decision. I would go with the flow and absolutely not correct the mistake of getting into the wrong bridal sedan. Edmund had secretly arranged for someone to switch the sedans to marry my cousin. If nothing unexpected happened, the bridal sedan at the Chen Manor gate had already been swapped. Since the marriage was decreed by the emperor, Edmund couldn't change it directly. But he could use this scheme to get his beauty. Once the rice was cooked, even the emperor would have no choice but to accept the mistake. When the auspicious hour arrived, Lily helped me out of the bridal chamber. From stepping out to getting into the sedan, I showed no sign of anything unusual. As expected, when the sedan arrived at its destination, I wasn't taken to the Eastern Palace, but was married into 4th Prince Alexander Xiao's residence. I continued pretending to know nothing, completing the wedding ceremony with Alexander. When we were led to the bridal chamber, I grabbed Alexander's large hand, pretended to stumble, and fell into his arms. His body was as rigid as iron, clearly a trained warrior. I'd heard that Alexander was the Emperor's white moonlight son. He should have had many opportunities to compete for the throne. But a few years ago, he suddenly developed a madness disorder, often flying into rages, disliking close contact with others, and especially avoiding women. But in my past life, I overheard in the palace that the reason Alexander transformed from a talented, handsome young man into a demon who could go mad was because the Empress had been slowly poisoning him. In other words, there was a spy in the residence. At this moment, I deliberately tested Alexander, wanting to assess how severe his madness was. The instant I fell into his chest, his large hand instinctively caught my waist. Caught, not pushed away. This showed that deep down, he wasn't as cold and heartless as rumored. In a voice only we could hear I said, "Thank you, husband." Alexander's hand on my waist tightened, then he helped me stand straight, his hand naturally withdrawing. Though the veil covered my face, I could still feel the cold aura surrounding him. Without a word, he led me directly to the bridal chamber. His palm was hot and calloused. Just entering the bridal chamber, Alexander almost immediately let go of my hand and silently left. However, very soon after, news of the 2 Chen brides getting into the wrong sedans spread everywhere. When the residence's people rushed to the Eastern Palace, they had already hastily consummated the marriage. Lily worriedly said, "First Miss, what should we do now? You were supposed to marry into the Eastern Palace." I lifted my veil myself, catching a glimpse of a dark red robe outside the door. I said, "What's there to worry about? I actually think this is heaven's will." I had secretly admired His 4th Highness for a long time. Now ending up like this, consider my wish fulfilled. Lily's mouth hung open. She naturally knew I had never admired Alexander, but men needed to be coaxed keep acting, and eventually he would believe it. A woman who loved him wholeheartedly and didn't despise his madness. He should at least show some tolerance, right? This would make my future days a bit easier. I covered Lily's mouth before she could speak carelessly, then continued. "It seems the gods heard my prayers and truly granted my wish. Everyone says my husband has a violent temper, but who knows, he was once a handsome young man. Others might not know, but I once encountered mountain bandits, and it was my husband who led people to drive off those villains. Since then, I've admired him. Several years ago, when Alexander was only 15, he had indeed suppressed mountain bandits. He saved many people and naturally wouldn't investigate whether I was among them. The most perfect lie is 7 parts false mixed with 3 parts truth, making it hard to distinguish fact from fiction." Lily was even more stunned at this point. Though I had taken her out many times and we'd encountered bandits, we'd always luckily escaped. She blinked, confused by my words. Just then, Alexander entered the bridal chamber, and Lily immediately stepped aside. The man had sword-like brows and bright eyes, his deep gaze like an ocean. He always frowned, seeming to carry an eternal melancholy in his eyes. His coldness made people forget his inherent handsomeness. The red wedding robes only enhanced his attractive features. My heart beat faster, not from attraction, but because I couldn't yet be certain I could tame this demon. I struck first. Looking at him with sparkling eyes, I carefully asked, "Husband, I heard that Sophia and I got into the wrong settings. The Eastern Palace has already performed the ceremony, so it seems we can't switch back. I guess I can only be your wife now." As I spoke, I smiled as brilliantly as a blooming peony, seeming very pleased with this outcome. Alexander frowned again. I reached out to touch his furrowed brow, but he quickly dodged. He truly didn't like being touched. Alexander coldly said, "Show some self-respect." I was speechless, continuing to persist with tears in my eyes. "We've already bowed to heaven and earth, yet husband tells me to show self-respect. Fine, I'll listen to husband. As long as husband isn't angry, that's all that matters. First be soft, then gain his trust before taking action smoothly." Being flexible was the mark of a strong woman. The palace quickly sent word that Edmund and Sophia had hastily consummated their marriage, so Alexander and I could only stay together. This wrong sedan incident was thus concluded. I got what I wanted, humming and singing as I headed to the bath. I knew Alexander was in the room, so I deliberately sang the most popular tune, about a woman's joy after marrying the man she loved. Even I felt my mood was genuinely good at this moment, though my mind was actually calculating many things. After all, it had only been a few hours since my rebirth. In my past life, Alexander died from his own madness. He committed suicide. Alexander was the emperor's white moonlight son. In recent years, as the emperor aged, the concubines in the harem could no longer arouse his interest. He increasingly missed his deceased white moonlight. Therefore, the emperor projected all his longing onto Alexander. This made the empress and Edmund eager to eliminate Alexander to prevent future complications. So I also had to accelerate my plans. Coming out of the bath, I wore a thin nightgown with a deep red mandarin duck embroidered undergarment clearly visible underneath. Just as I approached Alexander, the man coldly said, "Don't come near me." I froze like a startled bird, but then showed the shyness of a young maiden. My character was a sheltered lady deeply in love, temporarily married to him. Besides joy, there should naturally be some wrongs. I pouted as if wronged. "But husband, tonight is our wedding night." I bit my lip as if about to cry. Alexander frowned, his gaze sweeping over me before he decided to close his eyes. He lay at the edge of the bed, ignoring me. I hesitated a moment, then gently climbed onto the bed, my long hair deliberately brushing across the man's throat. But quickly I obediently lay down on the inner side, a small harmless trick he couldn't fault. However, when I pretended to sleep and gradually moved closer to Alexander, I could feel the man's body tensing. Soon after, he decided to get out of bed and leave the bridal chamber. I opened my eyes, smiling with satisfaction. A demon like Alexander, if he truly despised someone, he would directly drive them away rather than leave himself. This showed I still had a chance, which was good, but my time was running short. I had to act quickly. The next morning, Lily helped me with my hair and makeup, pouting, "First miss, who spends their first wedding night in the study. The young master is clearly treating you poorly." I looked at myself in the mirror, smiling. Nonsense. Husband must be cherishing me, letting me adjust for a few days first. My husband is the best person in the world, don't speak ill of him anymore. Lily wanted to say more when a tall figure entered the room. Alexander's face was expressionless, only saying, "After breakfast, we'll enter the palace to pay respects." I turned and smiled brilliantly at Alexander. "Yes, husband. Are you waiting to have breakfast with me? Husband is so good to me." Alexander's tightly pressed lips seemed to twitch slightly, as if helpless. When Alexander and I paid respects to the emperor and empress, Edmund and Sophia were already there. Sophia was my cousin, her uncle had no influence at court. Originally engaged to Alexander, now married into the Eastern Palace, she naturally glowed with satisfaction. Edmund, having married his beloved in this life, was also very pleased. The two didn't hide their exchanged glances. Despite only one wedding night, how deeply must they love each other? But would this love last? People always yearn for what they can't have, but once obtained, they soon grow tired and regret their initial choice. Moreover, this time I would put Alexander in that position. What was Edmund worth? During the tea ceremony, I kept smiling as if I too had married my dream man. Seeing me show no anger, Sophia frowned in disappointment. When we were alone in the imperial garden, Sophia deliberately boasted, "Cousin, this is fate. Who knew the settings would be switched?" Last night when His Highness saw I was the bride, he was overjoyed and didn't want to switch back. I had no choice. Now that His Highness and I have consummated our marriage, we certainly can't switch back. Cousin, marrying the fourth prince who avoids women. That's truly unfortunate for you. Did cousin sleep well last night? His Highness and I were passionately in love, harmonious as water. I wanted to vomit, easily imagining that scene. Edmund and Sophia had long been having an affair. Last night was naturally even more passionate. I smiled. What are you saying, sister? I should thank the sedan mix-up. To be honest with you, I've long been secretly in love with my husband. Eastern Palace has several concubines while the residence has only me. I naturally live more comfortably. Sophia was speechless. Indeed, Edmund loved beauties, and was very flirtatious otherwise. How could he have had an affair with Sophia so early? Sophia was jealous of my engagement to Edmund and deliberately acted lovingly whenever she met him. Edmund quickly took the bait. At this moment, somehow, Edmund and Alexander had appeared a few steps away. The two must have heard our conversation. Edmund's face showed subtle changes, looking at me several times. I temporarily ignored Edmund because sooner or later I would take everything he cared about, the throne and his life. At this moment, I lifted my skirts and ran toward Alexander, sweetly calling, "Husband." I reached out to touch the man's arm then withdrew, deliberately looking at him with adoring eyes. I had naturally expressive, romantic eyes. Anyone seeing my gaze would think I loved Alexander. Edmund frowned even more tightly while Alexander looked at me with an unreadable expression. During lunch, the Empress rewarded me with many treasures, appearing generous on the surface. The Empress was displeased with Edmund's wife swap. After all, my father and elder brother were the Chen family's pillars. My uncle's family was full of useless people. The Empress would certainly worry about the Chen family supporting Alexander and would accelerate plans to kill him. So during the banquet, I deliberately said something casual. "Why does this tea taste strange?" Sensitive as Alexander was, he indeed paused but said nothing more. He was careful and sensitive, wouldn't easily show emotions too clearly, but would definitely be suspicious. Next was to add more fuel to the fire. On the way back to the residence, assassins suddenly attacked our carriage, many of them, fierce and aggressive. Just as someone thrust a sword at Alexander, I didn't hesitate to throw myself in front of him. The sharp blade pierced my flesh, my shoulder immediately bleeding. Alexander probably didn't expect me to react so quickly. It wasn't that I was skilled in martial arts or unafraid of death. I had arranged all of this. This morning before entering the palace, I had summoned my elder brother Marcus for a private conversation. I told Marcus about my past life, how I was killed, my cousin's schemes and my uncle's calculations. In my past life, after my unborn child and I died tragically, my soul didn't dissipate. I witnessed Edmund and my uncle joining forces to kill my father and Marcus, seizing the Chen family's military power. I lost my mother young, and Marcus loved me dearly. Whether what I said was true or not, Marcus would cooperate with me. I told Marcus to send people disguised as assassins from the Eastern Palace. I could use this bitter trick to gain Alexander's trust, while using this incident to further strain relations between Alexander and Edmund. Edmund was ambitious, but what I worried about most was that Alexander didn't want to compete for that position. I wanted to force him to fight for it himself. The wound's position precisely avoided vital organs but was sufficient for my bitter trick. I fell into Alexander's arms, and before closing my eyes, I saw a flash of worry and surprise on his face. I continued playing the lovesick fool. "Husband, as long as you're safe, that's all that matters." Then I fainted. Alexander finally held me tightly, his voice still cold but revealing urgency. "Half of you stay to fight. The rest immediately escort the carriage back to the residence." Marcus, seeing his goal achieved, naturally wouldn't overdo it. So the fight here quickly ended, but the evidence left behind would all point to the Eastern Palace. Soon, the carriage arrived at the residence. Alexander carried me in, striding into the inner residence. Lily cried all the way. "Wah-wah, first Miss fears pain the most." This was indeed true. I really did fear pain. But now I had reached the point of no return. I was placed on the bed. Just as Alexander ordered someone to fetch the physician, I tightly grasped his arm, pretending to have nightmares. "Husband, leave quickly. Don't worry about me." He froze, no longer pulling his hand away. I mumbled a few words, then started calling for mother. Both he and I were motherless children. We could empathize even more. As I predicted, Alexander wasn't born cold and heartless. He was just tormented by the chronic poison the Empress administered, leading to his current temperament. He stayed by my side until the physician finished treating my wound, then I truly fell asleep. The next day when I woke, Alexander quickly came after hearing the news. His attitude had completely changed from yesterday. He would actively show concern and respond to my words. I knew my opportunity had come. Alexander was beginning to trust me. So 2 days later, I suppressed the pain and got out of bed, personally bringing tea to Alexander. Everything in the bedroom was fine, so the place I could think of was the study. Because the food and drink in the residence were normal, only Alexander in the entire residence suffered from madness, and the study was his private space. The Empress was clearly a careful and meticulous person. Seeing me, Alexander first froze, then seriously said, "Why did you come here? Your wound needs more rest." I made up an excuse, "But husband, I really missed you." The man's gaze paused, and I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but his eyes seemed evasive, as if he didn't dare look directly at me. I seized the opportunity to say, "Oh, how strange. My mother died in childbirth delivering me. So I've studied medicine since childhood and often disguised myself to sneak into military camps with my father and brother." I had smelled the problem in the study the moment I entered. Indeed, someone had tampered with the study. Alexander's expression turned cold. "What's wrong?" I blinked my clear eyes, honestly saying, "This tea water originally has nothing unusual, but once mixed with the benzoin incense here, problems arise. Inhaling it long-term will definitely increase madness and anxiety, making it impossible to calm the mind, until one loses control completely." Alexander seemed struck at his temple acupoint, his gaze freezing while a cold light flashed in his eyes. That day, Alexander sealed the residence and investigated thoroughly. He acted swiftly, catching the spy within half a day. After severe interrogation, the spy admitted to being the Empress's person. At the most crucial moment, I threw myself into Alexander's arms. I nestled against his broad chest, crying and trembling. "Husband, how much suffering have you endured these years? Does the Empress want to clear the path for the Crown Prince by hunting you to extinction? The Empress shows you no mercy and will continue to harm you. So Alexander, are you awake now? Only when Alexander becomes invincible can he become the sharp blade in my hand." I cried until my face was covered in tears, completely unable to stop. The ginger juice on my handkerchief worked wonderfully. Alexander didn't directly kill the spy, keeping her still had some use, but the courtyard still reeked of blood. I held his waist tightly, crying and trembling. I could feel the man's entire body stiffen, his hand slowly settling on my shoulder, gently pushing me away as if afraid of hurting my wound. Our eyes met, my tears flowing. "Husband, don't worry. I will definitely protect you." Alexander's gaze seemed to congeal just staring at me. Even he probably didn't notice his tightly furrowed brows had relaxed slightly. For so many years, though Alexander was a noble prince, he had been mostly lonely. A lonely heart could hardly resist fierce and sincere love. Alexander said nothing for a long time. I pretended to be innocent and said, "Husband, the Empress has poisoned you for so many years. I happen to have read some medical books. May I treat you? If something happens to you, how could I live on?" I wiped my eyes with the handkerchief, the ginger juice stimulating more tears. Alexander probably didn't know how to comfort others, helplessly saying, "Fine, very well." I had achieved another goal. Alexander needed a strong body to compete for the crown prince position. That night, I began diagnosing Alexander. He had been poisoned with chronic toxins for years, so even if he suddenly died one day, no one would suspect the Empress. "Husband, take off your clothes." Alexander's expression stiffened, his handsome face flushing. "My lady, you still have injuries." Had he misunderstood? I was slow to understand Alexander's meaning, pursing my lips in hidden laughter. "Husband, I want to use silver needles on your heart's blood to verify my speculation. If your madness comes from chronic poisoning, your heart's blood must be affected." "Husband, what were you thinking?" Seeing the man freeze, I teasingly added, "Though I've long admired husband and desire your body and looks, we're both injured now. I'm afraid we can't consummate our marriage." "What's wrong? Is husband anxious?" "Even more anxious than I am. I had disguised myself in military camps and heard plenty of crude talk. I was absolutely not a shy, sheltered lady. Alexander was stunned, then his gaze became evasive. I urged, "Husband, what are you waiting for? Take them off." Looking closely, the man's ears were also flushed. He really couldn't handle teasing. After several days of continuous treatment, plus removing the toxic incense from the study, Alexander's madness had improved. He was no longer so cold. But he didn't reveal anything, simultaneously forcing the spy to continue sending messages to the palace, letting the Empress mistakenly think everything was still under her control. To make it look real, Alexander deliberately had episodes at restaurants while I immediately embraced him, appearing to comfort him. After several such performances, rumors spread throughout the capital that the fourth prince's madness was worsening. And I, Miss Chen, became an object of sympathy, clearly meant to be the crown princess, yet becoming the fourth prince's wife who could lose her husband anytime. How regrettable. In reality, both Alexander's and my bodies were gradually recovering. Alexander was naturally a martial artist with exceptional constitution. Under my careful treatment, the poison's effects had become negligible. He often practiced swordsmanship in the courtyard, and I wasn't sure if it was my imagination. But whenever I passed by, he practiced even more vigorously. Soon came a crucial turning point. The annual autumn hunt had arrived. In my past life, Edmund and the Empress deliberately released wolves, plotting an accident to kill Alexander in the wolves' bellies. However, Alexander fought desperately alone, cutting his way out. But afterward, his madness worsened until he could no longer control it. Rather than hurt others, he chose to kill himself with his sword. This showed that deep in his soul, he was extremely kind. In this life, I wanted to change not only my fate but also help him change his. Every kind person deserved a good ending. Before the autumn hunt, I pretended to have nightmares, waking in the middle of the night and throwing myself into Alexander's arms, crying breathlessly. By now, Alexander had learned to patiently comfort me. His large hand gently patted my back, softly soothing, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I looked up, trembling all over, beginning my performance. "Husband, it was terrifying. I dreamed you were surrounded by wolves, and a gray wolf bit your calf. You must be extremely careful during this hunt. My handsome and extraordinary husband will naturally attract the Empress and Crown Prince's jealousy. If something happens to you, I won't live alone, I'll follow you in death." The words, "follow in death." In the quiet midnight, Alexander was completely stunned. He opened his mouth, momentarily speechless at my words, but his gaze clearly deepened several degrees. He was already considering my words. "All right, I'll be extremely careful." The next day, Alexander entered the palace. He would accompany the emperor's entourage to the hunting grounds while I secretly discussed with Marcus for a while. Recently, Marcus had investigated many things and naturally discovered clues. He said our uncle indeed intended to seize military power. The second branch and Edmund had long been in collusion. "Sister, fortunately you got into the wrong sedan." I just smiled without speaking. Old Madame Chen was currently our grandfather's second wife, not father's birth mother. Father and Marcus fought battles year round outside while the Chen family's inner residence had long been controlled by our stepmother, who favored the second branch. So people in the residence couldn't be trusted. In my past life, Father and Marcus were poisoned at home. Their years of military achievements all went to Uncle. Marcus said, "Sister, I'll secretly send people to protect your husband, he definitely won't be hurt at all." By the way, sister, have you and your husband consummated the marriage? I pursed my lips in hidden laughter. The time isn't right yet. Brother, don't rush. Marcus glanced at me. You're so confident you can definitely train the fourth prince. I nodded. Alexander and Edmund were completely different types of people. Today, I felt even more fortunate I had bet correctly. Not everyone could be trained, nor was everyone worth training. Alexander was in a good mood, but still maintained his cold expression. He had never thought he would meet a girl like Evelyn Chen. Heaven saw he lived too miserably and sent Evelyn to his side. Evelyn was infatuated with him, helped him catch the spy in the residence, detoxified him. She truly was his lucky star. Originally, he had been extremely tired of living, but now he only wanted to live to 100. There were still so many things he and Evelyn hadn't experienced together. Arriving at the hunting grounds, Alexander heightened his vigilance. He didn't act alone but stayed close to the emperor, serving by his side. He wanted to see just how bold Edmund was. What he didn't expect was that even with the emperor present, it didn't stop Edmund's determination to harm him. However, this worked in his favor. He would use their plan against them. So when the wolf pack attacked, Alexander immediately protected the emperor. When a wolf lunged at the emperor, Alexander drew his sword and thrust, saving the emperor in an instant. Only then did the hidden shadows and the darkness slowly appear. Only by letting the emperor truly feel danger would he cherish Alexander's life, saving grace even more. After a bout of killing, over half the wolf pack died, the survivors scattering. Alexander, naturally taciturn, only extended his hand to the fallen emperor. "Father Emperor, it's over." The emperor grasped his son's hand, as if seeing the girl who once captivated him with her high ponytail. The emperor was moved to tears. "Fourth son, you look so much like your mother consort. Back then, your mother also saved me at a hunt." Alexander didn't claim credit, only looking silently sorrowful. The emperor embraced him tightly, choking up, "I miss your mother consort so much." When Edmund and others arrived, they saw this scene of deep father-son affection. Edmund's face suddenly changed. Not only did the emperor care even more for Alexander, but he also praised him on the spot, rewarding him with 10,000 taels of gold and granting him an additional 1,000 household guards. According to the dynasty's laws, raising private guards required the emperor's permission, with a limit of 2,000. Exceeding this would be treated as treason. The residents already had over 1,000 guards. This showed how much the emperor valued and trusted Alexander. The emperor's action undoubtedly made Edmund even more anxious. The hunt ended early. As Alexander and Marcus passed each other, he politely nodded. "Brother-in-law, thank you for your help today." Marcus froze, scratching his straight nose bridge, unable to suppress a smile at the corners of his mouth. Brother-in-law. The fourth prince's mouth is quite sweet indeed. As soon as Edmund returned to the Eastern Palace, he flew into a rage. Though he and Sophia had only recently married, he couldn't help taking his anger out on her. "Sophia, your highness, please calm down. You're still the crown prince, you're the one his majesty values most." Edmund angrily said. "Shut your mouth." Sophia froze, clutching her handkerchief, not knowing what to do. Edmund clearly loved her deeply. No one knew that the chronic poison the Empress gave Alexander was gradually appearing in Edmund. The Empress could plant spies in residences, others could plant spies in the Eastern Palace. Those who do evil will receive retribution, this is only fair. Through Marcus's secret arrangements, Uncle gained no advantages. Soon after, Father guarding the southern border sent battle reports to the capital. The emperor was overjoyed, not only richly rewarding the Chen family, but also treating Alexander and me with special favor, even granting us several Eastern Pearl tributes this year. This made Edmund even angrier and more regretful. According to spy reports, Edmund even shouted at Sophia, "If I'd known, I wouldn't have switched wives. You're just like your father, both useless." Sophia wept, undressing before Edmund. Edmund had originally been attracted by her beauty, but since she married into the Eastern Palace, his enthusiasm for her was less than during their affair. Sophia couldn't understand why. Edmund pushed her away without mercy. Sophia fell to the ground, covering her face and sobbing. The chronic poison's effects prevented Edmund from thinking calmly. He already had little patience, and now felt like ants on hot coals. Edmund secretly summoned me, wanting to meet privately. I naturally gave him this opportunity, but deliberately left clues for people in the residence to inform Alexander promptly. Seeing me, Edmund's eyes immediately lit up, showing deep affection and appearing extremely regretful. "Evelyn, you should have married me. You and I are a match made in heaven. Do you want to correct this mistake? Fourth brother is just a sick man, he can't give you what you want." I smiled seductively, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. So Edmund was already tired of Sophia. After obtaining her, his white moonlight was just ordinary after all. This was the nature of such despicable men. Edmund thought I was flirting. The incense in the room began taking effect. Edmund's eyes showed clear lust as he lunged at me. I immediately dodged, screaming in fright. My fear only excited Edmund more. At this moment, Alexander kicked down the door. I saw him like a hero descending from heaven and threw myself into his arms. "Husband, thank goodness you came." The crown prince, he wanted to do improper things to me, saying I should have married him. I went limp as boneless. Alexander held me tightly, so angry his breathing became uneven. Alexander usually restrained himself in public, but now he directly kicked Edmund in the chest. I pulled Alexander back. "Husband, stop hitting him. He's the crown prince, we can't offend him. Alexander frowned, embracing me as we left, his eyes darkly murderous like a brewing storm. I knew his ambition for power had begun sprouting. This fire was burning at just the right time. Edmund, being in the wrong, didn't dare complain to the emperor despite being kicked and injured. The concubines in the Eastern Palace all suffered, especially Sophia as crown princess. She was tormented first. Sophia had long dreamed of being the mother of the nation. She surely never imagined that before Edmund ascended the throne, she would be tortured to the point where death seemed preferable. Edmund was extremely cruel. When Sophia came to our residence, despite thick powder on her face, it couldn't hide her injuries. Her walking was also strange, as if her legs were broken. Sophia dared to come directly to our door. She must be desperate, but this suited my purposes perfectly. Sophia brazenly entered the residence, declaring she wanted to personally meet Alexander. I could roughly guess her purpose. Alexander frowned at me, seeming unwilling to meet Sophia. I smiled and advised, "Husband, don't be afraid, I'll accompany you. Perhaps she has something important to say." Only then did Alexander agree. He held my hand as we went to the main hall together. Seeing this, Sophia's eyes filled with jealousy. If not for the Sedan mix-up, she would be the fourth princess, and I would be the one beaten in the Eastern Palace. She naturally felt unwilling. Alexander was taciturn and even less willing with Sophia. I asked, "Sister, what brings you to find my husband? Please speak directly." Sophia nodded like a proud dove. "This matter is very important. I hope sister will excuse us." Alexander coldly spoke in an icy voice, "Princess, I won't excuse my wife." I was stunned. Husband was so domineering. I felt inexplicably pleased. Sophia had never interacted with Alexander. Previously, she only wanted to cling to the Eastern Palace. Now with her dreams shattered, she gazed at Alexander infatuatedly but dared not go against his wishes. Sophia held back again and again before saying, "I know the true cause of Consort Shu's death. I can tell your highness, but these two marriages must be corrected. I should be the princess, and sister should marry into the Eastern Palace." How ridiculous. Before I could speak, Alexander said first, "Daydreaming in broad daylight, impossible." His reaction was very strong, as if he absolutely wouldn't agree to switch back. I understood he had fallen for me. Men like him were very loyal. Once in love, it was hard to change. Sophia felt incredulous. "Doesn't your highness want to know the cause of Consort Shu's death?" I also knew how Consort Shu died, but I had to let Alexander investigate himself so he would hate the Empress and Edmund even more. What I didn't expect was that Alexander wouldn't accept Sophia's kindness at all. He directly dismissed her. "Someone. See the guest out. Without this prince's permission, the crown princess may not step foot in the residence." With that, Alexander tightly grasped my hand, as if afraid I'd be switched away. I was touched. "Husband, then you must investigate the true cause of your mother's death yourself. Though sister won't tell you the truth, I believe with husband's abilities, you can definitely investigate clearly." Alexander's gaze was sincere and earnest, his throat moving as he softly answered, A few days later, Marcus came to the residence and spoke privately with me. "Sister, these past few days the fourth prince has been thoroughly investigating Consort Shu's death. The midwife who delivered for Consort Shu back then and Consort Shu's palace servants have all been carefully examined. Some died long ago, while others are now working in the Empress's palace. The fourth prince has now investigated clearly. Consort Shu didn't die from difficult childbirth, but was murdered by the Empress." Sister, do you really want to put the fourth prince in that position? Everything that had happened recently was enough for Alexander to solidify his beliefs. Only if he himself was ambitious enough could I achieve my desires. A person's motivation often comes from two factors: ambition and hatred. I poured Marcus a cup of Jade Dew Dragon Well tea. "Brother, if my husband can ascend, then I'll let you take that seat." Before I could finish, Marcus covered my mouth. In my past life, Father and Marcus were loyal to the Emperor, adhering to the 3 bonds and 5 constants, yet still ended up killed and dismembered. After being poisoned to death, their corpses were even chopped to pieces. I didn't need just a husband, I needed a king who'd protect me completely. If Alexander couldn't be that king, I would find someone else. It seemed there was a gaze watching from behind. Marcus signaled me and I immediately noticed. I didn't know how much Alexander had heard just now. Fortunately, Marcus and I hadn't said anything too treasonous. I turned to look at Alexander. Not seeing him for several days, he had clearly lost weight, with bloodshot eyes, but the difference was that between his brows seemed to show firm determination. I understood, he had made up his mind. I called out, "Husband, you're back." Alexander strode toward me, politely greeting Marcus. "Elder brother-in-law." Marcus scratched his head, laughing awkwardly. The three of us had lunch together. Then Marcus found an excuse to leave because Alexander's mood was truly strange. He showed no joy or sorrow, his smile uglier than crying, just continuously serving me food. I calmly asked, "Husband, are you all right?" Alexander looked at me for a while, then put down his chopsticks and directly grabbed my hand, pulling me into the room. Once the door closed, Alexander completely changed his attitude, pressing me against the desk in the study. He usually looked very proper, but in private was even more unrestrained. Alexander bit my earlobe, laughing hoarsely. "You say I'm cruel and heartless, making you live in fear all day. Is this the cruelty you mean?" He was deliberate. Fine, I'd play with him a bit. Not long after, war broke out at the northern border. At this time, only Alexander remained in court as a capable military general, so Alexander volunteered to go to battle. Previously, though he had madness, it didn't affect his fighting. After all, the heartless battlefield needed exactly a killing god like him. Before leaving, Alexander entrusted all 1,000+ household guards to my management. I personally saw him mount his horse. The man wore silver armor with the blue frost sword at his waist, handsome and refined, evoking images of jade halls and golden horses, romantic as a painting. With many eyes watching, I couldn't say much, only exchanging glances with him. The northern border war was also within our expectations. Great Yang bordered Northern Qi. A few years ago, Northern Qi produced a military genius who claimed to be from another world. Thanks to this person, Northern Qi gradually became rich and powerful. Being a warlike nation, they naturally disturbed neighboring countries repeatedly. But this was also an opportunity for Alexander and me. After the army marched north, I remained quietly in the residence, hardly going out. But all news in the capital was under my control. Spies and intelligence networks everywhere reported daily situations to me. From the palace to ministers' homes, I had to know all matters big and small to make the most accurate judgments. Edmund sent people to invite me many times. I declined, citing illness. After all, back at the Chen residence, I often feigned illness and hid away, actually going to the southern border with Father and Marcus to fight. So rumors of my weak constitution spread everywhere, and Edmund didn't suspect. Letters between Alexander and me used codes. Even if intercepted by Edmund's people, he couldn't decipher their meaning. The Empress and Edmund sent assassins to the northern border, plotting to assassinate Alexander. This mother and son even used sleeper agents in Northern Qi, wanting them to sabotage during the war to eliminate Alexander. Time passed quickly. 3 months later, what I worried about most still happened. Alexander stopped writing to me, and news came from the northern border that Alexander had fallen into an ambush and was trapped in a valley. It was now deep winter. Once troops were trapped, survival chances were slim. I didn't love him to death, but Alexander was already a sharp blade in my hand. A blade I had painstakingly sharpened. Absolutely couldn't be lost like this. That night, I had Lily disguise as me to continue feigning illness in the residence while I led the household guards out of the city, overnight to the northern border. I had kept Marcus in the capital precisely for this moment. Marcus worked in the Imperial Guards and had gate duty every 3 days. Mason was left to me by Alexander, his confidant who took great care of me on the journey. "Princess, the roads are long and difficult. Can you truly endure this?" I urged the troops to march quickly. Between life and death, I still didn't forget to act. My husband is still waiting for me. Arriving a moment earlier might make all the difference. As long as I can save my husband, I wouldn't regret dying. Mason was moved to tears. Look how easy men were to coax and deceive. Midway, heavy snow flew everywhere. When the troops reached a narrow mountain pass, arrows suddenly shot from both sides. Seeing this, I immediately shouted, "Protect lives above all, defend rather than attack." The guards raised shields, coordinating with long swords to barely block the arrows. Soon, seeing this, the enemy could only charge out for direct assault. I emerged from the carriage, shouting to their leader, "Heroes, you must want to rob supplies, right? No need to fight to the death like this. I'll give you half our provisions." The enemy numbered many. If we continued entangling, we'd lose troops and delay time, and I absolutely couldn't delay. So making peace at this crucial moment was the best path. The bandits probably didn't expect me to be so generous. I directly nodded to Mason, telling him to bring the provision carts from behind. The bandits looked at each other, their previously fierce faces changing expression. Litter, this. The bandit leader lifted the provisions, seeing they were genuine goods, then nodded and clasped his fist toward me. This young lady is truly generous. Since that's the case, I won't block your path anymore. If we really fought, neither side would gain much advantage at most mutual destruction. Moreover, these bandits wore tattered clothes, some skinny as bones. If not for survival, who would want to be bandits in this foreign land? I was confident we could leave smoothly. Before the bandits cleared the path, he asked, "May I ask how the young lady is addressed?" I smiled. An insignificant nobody not worth mentioning. I wish you all find good work soon. The bandit leader was stunned. As I entered the carriage, he bowed toward me. If the country was stable and people prosperous, why would there be so many displaced seeking food? Ultimately, it was because those in high positions hadn't fulfilled their responsibilities. It was time to change emperors. The troops continued forward, circling the snowy mountain paths, finally arriving 3 days later at Alexander's ambush site. But the scene showed only large rocks. Apparently enemies had ambushed from both sides of the gorge, throwing stones down. In other words, this place had enemy ambushes prepared in advance. The enemy knew Alexander's movements very well. The Empress and Edmund's Lewins had reached even the military camps. Looking at the desolate scene before me, I couldn't help but worry. My feelings for Alexander were at 50%, with the other 50% still self-love. So even if something truly happened to Alexander, I would quickly implement the next plan. My hand rested on my belly, no child yet, but if I wanted one, it wasn't impossible. When the time came, I could still support my child to compete for that position. However, before implementing the second plan, I would still do everything to save Alexander. Search for me. Don't stop until you find His Highness. The cold wind through the gorge made my eyes red. Mason thought I was crying and comforted me. "Princess, His Highness as heaven's protection. You must take care of yourself." I smiled resolutely. I hope so. The 1,000+ troops searched for a day and night but found no bodies under the rocks. I was overjoyed. Wonderful. His Highness is still alive. Then I wiped away tears that didn't exist. The question was, where was Alexander? He had disappeared from the military camp. The enemy had no news of him either. Just as I was confused, a black hunting dog ran from afar. Mason was delighted. "Little Black. It's the Little Black that His Highness keeps in camp." The hunting dog knew the way, and had probably smelled familiar scents before coming here. It ran to Mason then toward the back. Mason was overjoyed. "Princess, His Highness must be nearby." I immediately led people to follow. The cold wind hurt my eyes. I was prone to tears, so when I saw the heavily injured Alexander, tears covered my face. Seeing me, Alexander's throat moved. Leaning on a wooden staff, he walked quickly forward, the soldiers behind unable to dissuade him. "My lady, why did you come here?" 1,000 words became one embrace. His chin rested on my hair, his voice choked. "My lady, your devotion, this husband will remember forever." Alexander wasn't in mortal danger, but had injured his right leg, saving a subordinate from falling rocks. So he was temporarily hiding here to recover. The provisions I brought played a crucial role at just the right time. In the tent, Alexander settled me on a makeshift wooden bed. Heat from the fire gradually warmed my body. Alexander, fearing I wasn't comfortable, took off his only cloak and spread it beneath me. The man's chin was stubbly, thinner, his eyes even deeper. He held my hands, breathing warmth into them. He also removed my shoes and socks, holding my feet to his chest for warmth. "My lady has worked hard. Thanks to my lady this time you truly are my lucky star. My lady, I missed you so much." Alexander's gaze deepened, his voice tinged with desire. Facts prove the best way for a man to relieve longing, and the most direct way was making love in bed. The tent wasn't soundproof. Alexander was both passionate and restrained. Only after I fell asleep did the man lean close to my ear and sigh. "Evelyn, having you is wonderful. This life, I definitely won't fail you. Don't worry, I'll definitely seize that position for you." He thought I loved him deeply, just as he loved me deeply. Never mind, truth and falsehood didn't matter, what mattered was the final result. The next morning, blinding snow reflected outside, while the tent was warm as spring. When I woke, Alexander was staring at me intently. He didn't know how long he'd been watching. Seeing me open my eyes, he smiled and leaned down. I was a bit scared, curling up in his cloak, voice trembling. "You, don't come over," my voice is hoarse. Alexander held me tightly, somehow having learned a basket of sweet words. After 2 days of rest, Alexander and I returned to the main camp. The deputy generals were relieved to see the commander return safely. During Alexander's disappearance, he had secretly investigated within the military camp, mainly to find the mole. Returning this time, Alexander didn't expose the mole but deliberately released false strategies. As we expected, the mole indeed went to the Emmy camp to deliver intelligence. So when Great Yang and Northern Qi clashed again, Alexander used minimal troops to annihilate nearly 200 Zhaozhen Northern Qi soldiers. It was a great victory, the most glorious battle in Great Yang's history. Alexander rewarded the 3 armies. After dark he entered the tent, bathed himself, then approached me. I was looking at Northern Qi's map, pointing to several of their mines. "Husband, we could capture this azure pool for Great Yang's use." Alexander embraced me from behind. As cold and serious as he was outside, he was equally clingy in private. I could barely handle it. Alexander chuckled softly. "My lady, your strategies these days remind me of someone." I tried to stay calm. "Ooh, Alexander, Master Sterling." I had previously followed Father and Marcus under the alias Master Sterling, but I'd never crossed paths with Alexander. How did he recognize me? Alexander pressed close to my ear, full of satisfaction and amusement, not hiding anything. "I'm obsessed with military strategy. I was once shocked by your father and brother's tactics, so I investigated secretly. Who knew your father and brother were both fools? Master Sterling behind them was the real strategist. Pity I could never find that military advisor's whereabouts. I never imagined it was you. My lady, how many more surprises are you hiding from me?" I thought he'd be angry or wary, but unexpected Alexander grew even more excited, as if drugged, absorbed in discussing various techniques with me. Originally, the Northern Qi army at the border had been driven back. According to imperial decree, the army could return triumphantly to the capital. But Alexander and I decided to press our advantage. Now was when morale was high and provisions were adequate, the best time to suppress Northern Qi. All peace in this world was created beneath sword blades. When the army reached the border, I was stunned. I saw countless corpses hanging from trees at the 2 countries' border, looking like frozen dried meat at a glance. Among these corpses were women covered in wounds and children pierced through. The scene was utterly horrific. Alexander reached out to cover my eyes but forgot I had also witnessed life and death at the southern border. I didn't expect the northern border to be so terrible. This was no longer simply about competing for the throne or pacifying war. As a citizen of Great Yang, I couldn't tolerate this continuing. I choked out loudly. "Soldiers, hear this clearly, 1 Northern Qi head, 1 tail of silver. The more you kill, the more silver you earn." What I didn't expect was that the bandits I'd met earlier sought me out. After learning my identity, they actively requested to join the battle. If not for the Northern Qi people, we wouldn't be displaced. If not for the princess's generosity, we would have frozen to death in the snow. We humbly request the princess give us a chance to repay you. I nodded agreement, still thinking the same. If the country was peaceful and prosperous, who would want to be bandits? These people stayed behind to handle the aftermath, taking down corpses for hasty burial with unmarked gravestones. For the next half-month, the army's morale soared even higher, striking directly into Northern Qi's cities. Victory reports from the northern border continuously reached the capital. I deliberately had people return to spread news that the 4th prince was very popular in the army with widespread support. I had Alexander deliberately reveal ambitions before the mole. The distant Empress and Edmund in the capital definitely wouldn't sit idle. Our purpose was to force the Empress and Edmund to act first, giving Alexander sufficient reason to march on the capital. After the army captured Northern Qi's palace, Alexander and I quietly waited for news from the capital, instead spending several leisurely days. Alexander found some romantic storybooks somewhere, insisting on acting them out with me. "My lady, tonight let's switch identities. You be a weak young lady, and I'll be your guard. Or you be an arrogant, willful young lady, and I'm the male favorite you forced to serve you. How about it?" He really knew how to play. The storybooks didn't lie. The colder a man appeared outside, the more romantic and unrestrained he was inside. A month later, The Empress and Edmund indeed forced their way into the palace. This mother and son wanted to force the late emperor to abdicate so Edmund could ascend early and deal with Alexander at will. Learning this news, I immediately sent hawks to the southern border, telling father to lead troops back to the capital. Alexander's forces couldn't move, they had to temporarily remain in northern Kiev's garrison. Alexander and I took only Fun Zhao's and household guards, setting out that night for the capital. With Edmund forcing the palace, father had sufficient reason to deploy troops. When Alexander and I reached the capital, father's forces had already surrounded the palace under the banner of eliminating traitors. Though Edmund controlled the palace, his forces couldn't match father's. The late emperor was near death, wanting burial with his white moonlight before dying, which angered the empress into stabbing him. When Alexander and I rushed into the palace, the empress was screaming madly, cursing the late emperor. Consort Shu was your majesty's beloved. What about me? What am I? I am your wife. I coldly watched this scene. Did the late emperor truly love Consort Shu? As emperor, how could he not investigate Consort Shu's death? But he still did nothing to the empress, only because of her maternal family's power. To preserve stability, the emperor could let Consort Shu's killer continue as empress, enjoying glory and wealth for half her life. This showed how deep his love for Consort Shu could be. The so-called white moonlight was simply because she was lost, the dead naturally had no equal. Edmund was captured. The empress was killed by Alexander's sword for regicide, he had completely avenged his mother. The late emperor, gasping for breath, was saved. Marcus didn't understand. Brother-in-law, why don't you directly replace the late emperor? Alexander smiled bitterly. Elder brother-in-law, I grew up without a mother. I can't lose my father now too. Marcus pursed his lips. This trashy father isn't needed. But Alexander was inherently gentle, I didn't advise him either. After all, the crown prince position was definitely his, and the throne was only a matter of time. After Edmund and Sophia were imprisoned, they insisted on seeing me once. I originally didn't want to bother, but the messenger said, Princess, the deposed crown prince says he knows everything. I slightly frowned. What did the deposed crown prince know? Curiosity arose. I still went to the imperial prison. Before seeing the deposed crown prince, the smell of blood hit my nose. Sophia was dying, clutching her belly as blood continuously flowed from below. Her hair was disheveled as she reached toward me. Cousin, save me. The deposed crown prince went mad, beating Sophia brutally. Then like a wild dog lunging at the cell door, eyes wide with madness begging. Evelyn Chen. In the past life, this vile woman instigated everything. I've already avenged you. Can you return to my side? You're my crown princess, you should support me. Your father and brother should support me. Then the deposed crown prince lunged at Sophia again, tearing her clothes and biting directly. Sophia's screams echoed throughout the prison. So the deposed crown prince had also been reborn. His will and self-control were far inferior to Alexander's. In the past life, Alexander ultimately committed suicide. He'd rather harm himself than implicate others. The deposed crown prince was different, he had become a demon. What surprised me was that the deposed crown prince fell off a cliff on the way to exile. When found, only a few ribs remained, probably eaten by wolves after falling, dying without an intact corpse. This was retribution. The late emperor quickly passed away. Alexander smoothly ascended the throne. Initially, some ministers opposed it, citing Alexander's madness as potentially harmful to court politics. But Alexander revealed all of the late empress's deeds. The so-called madness was also caused by the late empress's poison. Alexander had no choice but to suppress his anger, which caused his previous erratic behavior. The day I was crowned empress, I asked Alexander, Your Majesty, why didn't you directly ascend the throne before? Why be crowned prince for a few days? It seems unnecessary. After the palace incident that day, Alexander had already taken over the government. Alexander smiled. You should have been crowned princess. After the Sedan mix-up, countless people mocked you. So I wanted you to experience being crowned princess once, so that was why. Alexander remained obsessed with bedroom matters, but my belly showed no signs of movement. Ministers repeatedly petitioned, urging the emperor to expand the harem. Only after having the imperial physician examine me and confirm there were no obstacles did I secretly watch Alexander and was secretly taking contraceptive medicine. I was stunned, my eyes slightly moist. I thought I was too deeply invested, moved by him. Alexander explained, Mother consort died in childbirth. Even though she was harmed by villains, I still worry. Wait until you're past 20, then I'll let you conceive. I threw myself into his arms like a weak beauty loved by her husband, moved to tears. Alexander would never know that if he truly feared the Chen family and wouldn't let me bear his children, I might have killed my husband for the path. While secretly investigating the inability to conceive, I had already calculated several plans in my mind. 2 years later, I smoothly gave birth to our eldest son. This child was undoubtedly the crown prince. Alexander personally oversaw the crown prince's education, also suppressing all officials' petitions for consorts. Alexander once said his first half, life's tragedy, came from royal infighting. He absolutely wouldn't let his children fall into the vortex of competing for imperial power. We had 2 sons and 1 daughter total. The remaining years were happy and healthy. I always knew when to be soft and yielding at the right times, never showing dominance. If there was no danger, then hide and wait. People didn't necessarily need to be the lead bird. Of course, I also frequently had Father and Marcus express loyalty, eliminating any imperial suspicions. Many years later, on a red sunset evening, Alexander held my hand strolling through the imperial garden. He was naturally reserved and cold, rarely confiding in others. His best chess partner seemed to be me. He asked, "Empress, do you still love me? The crown prince has ascended, am I old?" He was now the retired emperor, no longer interfering in court affairs. I smiled and leaned against him. "Your Majesty is the person I love most in this life." Love. Of course I loved, but only loved myself completely and without reservation. This life's chess game was played with the right moves, but that didn't mean I completely believed in romantic love in this world. Life lessons from the story. True power comes not from love or loyalty, but from strategic thinking and self-preservation. Evelyn's journey teaches us that in a world of palace intrigue and betrayal, survival requires wearing masks and playing roles. While she helped Alexander overcome his demons and seize the throne, her heart remained guarded, loving only herself completely. The story reminds us that sometimes the strongest people are those who appear weakest, and that patience combined with careful planning can overcome even the most powerful enemies. Ultimately, protecting oneself first isn't selfish, it's necessary for survival in a cruel world.